I'm Sean Fennessy.
I'm Amanda Dobbins.
And this is The Big Picture, a conversation show about a May movie massacre. This weekend, tough one. Underperformance at the box office, critical crucifixion of two new wide releases. We're not just talking about movies that are opening wide, we're also talking about movies on Netflix, which also kind of suck. And so if we're talking about movies that kind of suck, there's only one man to join us.
Woo!
Hater-in-chief, the closer, Charles Holmes. What's up, Charles?
Can I test this out?
Yeah.
I think I'm looking for, The Ringer, we got video. We're obviously on video. I was thinking of a new kind of nickname, the most controversial cultural critic of his generation. What do we think? Can we redo that? Can you introduce me as that?
I'm not going to retake the intro, but yes, we can call you that going forward.
Can we do chyrons, Corey? And do we have that technology just to have the most controversial cultural critic of his time, just like lower third? Okay.
Hell yeah.
I got
When
a
did your
thumbs up from
time
Corey, our
start? Like
producer.
when did the Chuck era begin? Was it when you started at The Ringer? Was it the day you were born?
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, I came out of the womb like this, now that I'm thinking about it. But I do have a twin brother who is way worse,
Oh, interesting.
who looks exactly like me.
A bigger
And-
hater.
Oh, he's like, he'll listen to the Midnight Boys and he's like, honestly, you didn't go in fucking hard enough, Charles.
Okay.
And I'm like, man, if you check Reddit or the Facebook group or
You
any
need to-
social media, they would disagree.
You can't do that. You know? You got to live in your own world.
Live in
of-
my freedom, live in my
Yeah, of your standards. That's what they are. It's not hate, it's standards.
You know, if I'm being honest, it's
Mhm.
not that this is a trio of quite poor movies that we're going to be discussing on the pod today that Charles is here. Actually, months ago, I hit up Charles and I was like, hey, we definitely want to have you back on soon. Here's a list of movies we're going to be talking about. Pick one.
Yes.
You picked Back to Black, which is the new Amy Winehouse biopic, which we'll get to in the second segment of this conversation. You're a former music critic. Are you still a music critic? How do you think of yourself?
I mean, Drake and Kendrick dragged me back into the arena.
Yeah.
Like I was just like, guys, I never want to talk about this again. So technically, as of 2 weeks ago, still a music critic.
I
Yeah.
read it. I enjoyed it. It was very smart. Yeah. And then they kept.
Really quickly,
Yeah.
what do you guys think of Not Like Us? They not like us. They not like us.
I mean,
Were you crip walking? I saw Sean crip walking in San Mateo.
You didn't. I think the idea that song is a huge hit is fascinating.
Yeah.
Bonkers.
And obviously, I love Kendrick. I've always loved Kendrick. Fascinated by Kendrick's arc. Fascinated by how just mad Kendrick seems
Yeah,
right now.
Big mad.
But I didn't see that coming. I'm much more interested, though, long term in what happens to Drake. That's the thing that I'm
just saying,
fascinated
number
by.
one song in the country being like, hey, the biggest pop star
Right.
potentially ever. I think he's a pedophile. And then just people being like, we're
But-
singing this for
But
weeks.
also, it's sort of a bop, you know? And we're just
Yes.
we're in dire need of bops in this country right now. Like, espresso is all we have. You know
Oh.
what I'm saying?
I think
Okay, no, don't. Excuse me. What is it? My give a fuck is on vacation? What is it? My something? It's good.
Gen Z mommy
Yeah.
right here.
It's
She
good.
has arrived. So we asked you to come on for Back to Black.
Yes.
And then it just so happened that Back to Black was going to be released the same weekend as If, the new John Krasinski children's vehicle. And I was like, do you want to talk about
Think?
If? And then when it became clear that Back to Black wasn't very good, and then it certainly seemed like If wasn't going to be very good, I was like, let's just sprinkle a little bit of Pop-Tart onto the end of this episode. So
No,
we're going to
you
talk about
crashed
Unfrosted.
into the group chat
Yeah.
being like, we need to discuss Unfrosted. And within 5 minutes of watching it, I was like,
We
do
do.
we, though?
Well, we do or we don't.
how did
you
you feel
know?
about the addition of Unfrosted to this discussion?
I think it's good to look at all the poor choices being made everywhere. You know, it's
Mhm.
not just in children's entertainment. It's not just in the specialty music pick by box office. It's also on Netflix. Everyone is just grasping around in the dark for something, and they don't always find it.
It's weird that it's happening in May. That's the thing that I find odd. Now, obviously, we had strikes last year, and that pushed a lot of release dates. There wasn't as much production as you'd normally expect, but this is not a month typically full of fucking nightmares at the movie theaters. So it's kind of fascinating that it's happening at this moment. It's happening concurrent to the Cannes Film Festival, where it seems like there are a lot of big swings, and maybe not all of those big swings are landing.
How are you feeling about this? Because here's the thing. Your people,
Yeah.
the movie critics, they're pocket watching Coppola heavy.
Yeah.
And it's just, I'm not really fucking with it. But how are you feeling? Because it doesn't seem like it's going well for you.
Well, we haven't seen the movie, right?
Okay.
So
I mean, and that's our main anxiety is that, like, we don't know when we'll get to see the movie because it still doesn't have a distributor.
So it might be months until y'all are like, I finally get to see Megalopolis.
I mean, it could be years.
Yeah,
like,
well,
you really
will we
don't
get
know.
to see it?
I mean, maybe someone will hit me when it opens in France next year. Or maybe I have to go to... Now, that would be fun to go to France to see it after skipping the Cannes Film Festival. Here's the thing. I've told Amanda this a couple times. I fucked up so bad by not going to Cannes this year. Like,
Why
we
didn't
should have
you?
gone.
Can you just,
I don't know why.
Can you look direct into
I
the
fucked
camera?
up.
There we go.
I'd like to apologize to myself because I owed it to myself.
What about me?
I apologize to Amanda
Thank you.
for
Where
not
did you
pushing
go?
us to go to the
We
Cannes
could be
Film
in
Festival.
France right now. I know it because he was not excited enough about it for me to make the push again to go to Cannes. It's my lifelong dream to go to Cannes.
I didn't even think hard enough about it this year, and then I see what is happening. It's like, okay, Megalopolis, as you said, people are pocket watching. They think it's ridiculous. There's live interactive experiences happening at the premiere.
Yes.
Coppola giving fascinating press conferences afterwards. Missed that. Paul Schrader, my guy, is being incredibly mean and controversial about things all the time. Also could die at any moment.
Right.
Still dropping Richard Gere movies. Kevin Costner openly weeping with 9 beautiful women on his arm, premiering Chapter 1 of
the
Horizon.
most divorced man in America.
Remarkable divorced man energy. I support
Hero.
all of it.
Love it.
It seems like the smaller films are also incredibly chaotic and divisive. There was a lot of talk last night about this movie, The Substance, which I talked about on our most anticipated movies episode. This Corley Fargiat body horror movie. All the men who saw it were like, this is the best movie I've ever seen. Feminist body horror masterpiece.
Right.
And all the women were like, this is a piece of garbage that should be thrown in the trash. So I feel like I'm missing out on all this
the
stuff.
Demi Moore press tour Oscar campaign. I really
It's gonna be
can't wait.
amazing.
Anya
Can't wait.
Taylor-Joy looked like she's just like, this movie destroyed me, but
Yeah.
thank you for clapping.
Yes,
Yeah.
Furiosa, Kinds of Kindness, a lot of movies that are like, damn, that was certainly a choice. All of the movies, that's how you define them. So we missed out on that. That was a big mistake. Instead, we sat home and we watched Unfrosted like a couple of clowns.
Right.
And I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Can you say maybe that movies were a mistake or are a mistake? Because after these 3, I'm starting to feel that way.
Well, the thing is that there is no boldness in any of these 3 movies. Like the Cannes films, clearly, decisions were made. and people will have to live with those decisions for the rest of their lives. These movies, they feel, well, let's start with
Decisions were made.
If.
But I don't care. Well, at least in the case of If, written and directed by John Krasinski,
Yeah.
decisions
From
were
the
made.
mind of John Krasinski.
The imagination of John Krasinski.
Do I agree with the decisions?
Well, okay, so we'll take one step back.
Yeah.
Okay. If an original kids movie from...
Is it?
Well, it's an original story that he
Yes.
created from whole cloth, obviously inspired by a lot of things. Back to Black, also in its way, original IP, of course, from the artist, but not a franchise entertainment. And Unfrosted, while it is deeply pre-branded in some problematic ways, a new movie from, frankly, a legend of American comedy
Yes.
Yeah.
in a style that used to be a very successful style of comedy at the
It's true.
movies. So, if you took your glasses off and you saw the blurry versions, the outlines of these movies, you'd think like, pretty cool, actually. This is a lot of stuff that sometimes we complain we don't get. And then
I don't know if I would go to cool, but
Yeah.
like even
maybe you wouldn't write them off immediately.
before I put my contacts in. That's how I see the world every morning, by the way. But people trying things. Listen, people are always trying things.
Okay, let's talk about the try of If, because there's a lot of trying.
Can we set the scene?
Yes.
Which is that we 3 saw If together at a 10:50 a.m. screening at the La Cañada Regal. My return to my beloved La Cañada.
I actually like this movie theater.
This was it your first time there?
This was my first time
Okay.
there.
Yeah. They, the recliner seats. I would say that even though Sean has identified this as a children's movie, we were by far the youngest people in the theater, which
Yep.
was notable
Yeah.
because that is something that we can rarely say. I won't speak for
Right.
Charles,
It was-
but Sean and I are usually dragging up the median.
Right. It was us and 7 single ticket serial murderers seated in dispersed areas.
Because I got there first and I was just like, damn, this is going to be weird. People were like, what's this 30-year-old doing
Right.
watching this children's movie at like 10
Yeah.
a.m. in the morning? And then it was just like a bunch of just like one ticket holders just started walking. And I was like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is this going to be the biggest movie in America?
Yeah.
And it's not.
And we all sat together pretty much in silence
Yeah.
as the events unfolded before us.
If I want to be generous,
Mhm.
I understand what John Krasinski was trying to achieve here. There is a certain kind of movie that is a combination of animation or creature effects with the real world that has a long lineage in Hollywood. And if you like, I don't know, Anchors Away, you love Anchors Away.
Well, I like it when Jerry and Gene dance
Yeah.
together. Yeah, I like Anchor's
Okay.
Way as well, but I do. You're right.
You love
In
Mary
that-
Poppins, you know?
Yes.
Are you comparing If to Mary Poppins?
I'm not.
Sean?
He's making, and you've identified the two scenes in those movies that my 2-year-old son gravitates towards. So I see your point.
Yes. And I mean, this is something that's been happening for years, and there are older and younger versions of this. Like Jim Carrey's The Mask is a version of this movie. Tron, Mars Attacks, this collision, obviously Who Framed Roger Rabbit, probably the most critically acclaimed version of a story like this. This is a mini genre. It's a subgenre of movies. It's the collision of the adult sensibility with a childlike view of the world of characters and storytelling. In this story, John Krasinski is iterating upon a topic that we actually already talked about this year on the show, Charles, when we talked about the movie Imaginary, which I assume you did not see.
Wait, what?
There's another movie
You didn't see Imaginary?
about an imaginary friend.
It's
Wait,
a-
is this the horror movie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sort
no,
of.
no, no. I saw the trailer for this. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, fuck. Did you like this one?
The If or Imaginary?
Imaginary?
Imaginary is my favorite horror film of the year so far.
How
it
many
also-
have you seen?
It's
total?
the only horror film that I have the year so far that I have seen. I might be seeing another one soon.
I
right?
hope so. I hope
Yeah.
so.
I thought it was really funny at the beginning. I mean, there's a scene where this little girl is just screaming at a teddy bear, being like, I don't want to be friends anymore, Chauncey. And then she, as the bear, is like, Alice, you must be my friend. Also, the bear,
I love
the
your
little
work
girl's
as
name
Chauncey.
is Alice, which is just funny because that's Sean's daughter's name. So that it's like as a bit, yeah, I had a great time. But did I connect to the imaginary friend framing and payoff of this movie? No, I did not.
Do either of your children have imaginary friends yet?
Yeah, I want to
Well-
get into that a little bit. I want to explore that. Let's wait until we finish talking
Okay.
about If, because that's one of my questions as we talk through this. Because
Sure.
Imaginary is a $10 million horror movie. It's a very low stakes movie. It's like a single location movie. If is basically a $100 million movie. It stars Ryan Reynolds, whose name we have yet to mention, and it features arguably the most star-studded voice cast in movie history. Now, obviously, this is because Krasinski is friends with a great number of very famous people. It's set in Brooklyn. The true star of the movie is Kaylee Fleming, a teenage actress, and she plays a 12-year-old girl who's lost her mother and whose father is about to have heart surgery, I think.
It's not specified.
Not clear.
So like all of the medical parent stakes of this movie are confusing and upsetting.
But weirdly low because of the lack of specificity.
Well, so the first 10 minutes of the movie, and we're going to spoil all three of these.
Yes.
I'm sorry if you don't
I'm
want to.
sorry
Yeah.
if you are like, I am so interested in the If extended universe, but we will be
And like
spoiling.
maybe in the case of If, we're doing people a favor because I had a conversation with a friend at a birthday party yesterday. He has a 3-year-old daughter, and he was like, we were gonna go see If, and then I heard it was really dark, so now we might not go see If. And I was like, yeah, let me tell you about the first 10 minutes of the movie, which are Krasinski trying to do his own Up montage, but about this little girl's mother dying, and they're like trying to make it happy as she dies, and you just watch all the happy memories of her childhood as she's very obviously stricken with what you assume to be cancer, because at some point she loses her hair, and then she dies. So that's how that starts. I wasn't happy.
I was wondering what, like, if I was to bring a child, the first like 10 or 15, I'm like, well, at least with Up, it's like some of the most beautiful animation you have. I'm just like, this is just John Krasinski for 15 minutes just being like,
Right.
what if you had to watch your mother die of cancer? And I'm like, this seems like a really weird way to start this type of movie.
Very upsetting.
It's ultimately accurate to the film, though, because this is just a really maudlin, sentimental movie about, I guess, a kind of lost childhood or like the inability or the ability to reconnect with what it means to be a kid. But everything you're saying is right. Like, this is a movie that is neither for 3-year-olds nor for 13-year-olds. 13-year-olds will think it is too kiddie and too baby, and toddlers and even 5 or 7-year-olds, I think, are going to be like, this is a little dark and upsetting.
Right.
And so the whole movie is neither fish nor fowl. The whole time you're like, is this supposed to be funny? Is this supposed to be like emotionally affecting? What was it that they were going for? I could never really wrap my arms around the movie.
It takes a full 45 minutes for any of the characters. Maybe it doesn't take 45 minutes. It feels like it's like a very long time, because after that prologue, which is just her mom dying, really sad.
It's just the entire credit sequence ultimately.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of preamble of how she has to move in with her grandmother, played by Fiona Shaw, in an immaculate apartment overlooking the Brooklyn Heights Promenade and the full skyline of Manhattan, which would not be possible anymore because of movie stars like John Krasinski and Matt Damon, who have moved onto that very block. But anyway, and she has to move in with her while John Krasinski also has to go to like a very chic hospital for an unspecified surgery on an unspecified date, but like mostly he's just hanging out in sweaters playing pranks in the hospital and is like totally fine.
Krasinski's character has a case of what I like to call magic dad.
Yes.
There's a certain kind of dad who's like, what I do is magic. And I don't mind saying I love magic. I've said it before on this pod. I'll say it again. I really enjoy magic. Magic is a little bit creepy. You know, guys who are really into magic, and I'm being self-incriminating here. It's a little weird.
Wait, were you a magician as a child?
Never worked as a magician in my life. Never even played as a magician. I
Do
actually
you know magic
like,
tricks.
But no, but he's like into it.
I like the wonder of it. So I'm coming from a place of understanding with what Krasinski's going for. I kind of like John Krasinski against some of my better instincts. I thought he was incredibly creepy in this movie. I thought he was one of the creepiest dads in movies I've seen in a long time. And that's not what he was trying to do. He was trying to be the kind of father who makes a strong connection with his daughter because they have their own like language, their own series of bits.
And also preserving her childhood, her sense of childlike wonder. He's trying to relieve the stress that this young girl has taken on far too early because she lost her mom. So it's true. He's like dancing around with like an IV with a face on it. But he's never in a hospital gown. He like doesn't seem sick at all. Like he's just fine. And she visits him multiple times, bringing like flowers.
And he's hiding in the closet.
But he's like impeccably dressed.
Yeah.
And it's just like, hey, I'm great. And I'm like, why are you at the hospital? Like, what kind of hospital prep is this? What surgery? What's happening?
Here's the thing. I wanna stay on this because when I was watching this movie, it dawned on me, and I wanted to ask you, Sean, are America's white fathers okay? You know, it's Bluey seems it's up in the air. We don't know if Bluey is coming back.
Right,
and it's just like,
yeah.
I've seen a lot of white dads just losing their minds.
Yeah.
Tom Brady has realized he's a father.
Yeah.
5 seconds ago, he's like, damn, doing that roast, probably not great for my kids. And now, I feel unfortunate for your generation because just through process of elimination, the dads that are representing your age group are John Krasinski and Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, that's tough.
For the people, the listeners of America, what's going on with white fatherhood?
You know, if I were a cynical man, I would leave The Ringer and I would join the New York Times and I would only write columns from that perspective. I would be the white fatherhood correspondent and I would have an incredibly flourishing career. No, I mean, we're not doing well. I would say we're not doing well. You know,
they're all exploring Pilates for the first time because, their backs are really hurting them, but they haven't had to care for their bodies until now.
But now it's socially acceptable where it's just like we're all doing Pilates.
Well, I will steal a theory from Ringer podcaster Yassi Salik. She has been talking about this for years, but I really believe in her thoughts on this. Now, this is a broad sociological observation. It is not science. It is just something that she has spotted, but that I recognize, which is that my generation is the first to experience a profound loss of American masculinity in the household, that the divorce rates go way up in the 80s and 90s in America. And because of that, and then that happens concurrent to this evolved thought around the nature of parenting for those who are in their 30s and 40s now, where co-parenting or the male presence being much more significantly involved than previous generations in child rearing. So you've got all these dads who waited 10 years longer than their parents did to have kids, who got used to their normal adult lives, who also had this absent influence of a male figure in their life, trying to come to terms with how to be a good parent without a strong role model, while also turning over a lot of their life to it. And all of these dudes are like, what I need to do to express that feeling is make the film If. And that's like, it is making so, like, these are the most successful people in the universe, John Krasinski and Ryan Reynolds. Like, they are.
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds, who I really don't like unless he's wearing the Deadpool costume, is crushing the universe. Like, he is so rich and successful. And he's like, what I need to do to spend more time living in this brain cave is making the movie If. It's a really weird choice. This is a very strange movie. It does indicate, I think, something odd is happening with the male psyche.
These were his chips. Like, he was like the guy. Like, there was a point where America was like, we were stuck in the house. People were like, we should throw millions at Jonathan Krasinski for his weird, like, morning show about positivity. And then I'm like, you did A Quiet Place. Finally, like, the movie star thing worked for you, bro. And I'm like, If was the follow-up. Like, that's the one where you're really like, you know what?
This is what he wanted to do.
And I was watching this whole time being like, what was it about If that you were like, this is what the American people need to see right now? And I could.
Well, what do you think it is?
Why are you asking me? I have no idea. Like, what? Like, I was so baffled by this movie. I don't understand the recent, and 2 is not a trend, but the fascination with imaginary friends. And it does seem of a piece with the Good News show, whatever that was called, where he's like, now I'm just going to be like Mr. Positivity and Mr. Family Guy.
But then he like sold it to a corporation and then decided he wasn't going to host it anymore after he sold it and somebody else was going to host it. I was like, this is even more cynical. Like, what is this? It's a really weird turn.
I don't get it. I was constantly baffled, and it took me a long time to even figure out like what the movie was trying to tell me about imaginary friends, and ultimately it's about trying to preserve some sort of connection to your childhood and childhood wonder, and that you can take that with you whatever age you are. So I don't know, maybe he had a rough year and was like, I need to see the world like a child again. Is
this how children see the world? Because even like the imaginary friends, I was a little bit like, this movie was weird because the entire plot and idea of this, there was already a successful children's show that ran on Cartoon Network that had a main character that was literally called Blue. And this one's literally just the big Steve Carell character is called Blue.
It's a great point. I hadn't thought about that.
This is like the cartoon
Blue's
Is that Blue's Clues or
no,
Bluey?
it was called Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends.
Yeah, don't try to Cartoon Network me. You don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, this was
but there's
past
also
my
Blue's
time.
Clues.
I was just I watched it once and I was like, oh, so he's making another idea that is based around imaginary friends being in a foster home. But this movie never could kind of figure out the world building of it.
Totally.
Right.
Because I'm just like, all right, so all of these imaginary friends are all centralized in New York. And their whole goal is to either find them new kids or remind their adults that they exist. And if I'm an adult, I was just like, if somebody like stuck me with an imaginary friend, I'd be like, can I take them back? I don't have room in my apartment for them anymore. Like, this is weird.
Right.
And Coney Island is the holding station for imaginary friends who've been outgrown.
It's like 15 imaginary friends.
Right. It's
in
a small
all
group.
of the New York metro area.
Right. And 8 million people live there.
Also, you can change the foster home with your mind, which was also a thing where I was just like, is the imaginary home real? Because the girl and Ryan Reynolds go in there and she's just like, well, I'm going to make it prettier.
Right. And so how does her mind relate to the foster home?
Yes.
Is a good question, because then at some point, like the first line of this movie is basically like Joan Didion for children, you know, like we tell ourselves stories. But it is just like, it's that combined with the Game of Thrones finale, combined with, you know, like elementary school. And then at the climactic moment where she rushes in to see her dad, and the grandmother has just done a terrible job setting expectations as a grandmother. And she's like, we have to go to the hospital right now because he might die. And then it just turns out that he's just in recovery. And he's in fact been released from the recovery room. Like, he's back in the really nice hospital bed again, just resting. And she's like, which again, confusing. But she's like, Dad, I have a great story to tell you. And then she tells a story about how she's a kid and not an adult. And he's like, that was the greatest story. And so I'm like, am I supposed to understand that this whole foster home and all the imaginary kids were a story she was telling herself?
Yes.
Wait,
Okay,
no,
but so
because they all get their kid. They all get in the Skeezer
Yeah.
Tinger. They all get their little like imaginary friends back.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
Along with
yes.
people that, I guess they're all people that she's interacted with.
I think that if you interviewed John Krasinski,
Yeah.
he would say this all really happened. That the life of the mind is very powerful, and that we all have
so
these friends.
that he's just like, this is actually
But-
Inception, but for kids.
Right. Exactly. I mean, yes.
Yeah, sure.
But
Great.
like when I watched the movie at the end of it, I was like, this is a film about mass psychosis. You know, that we are an infantilized culture that like desperately to be okay needs to reconnect with what it feels like to be 4 years old. Now, frankly, this movie is very on trend for what you've been talking about on the Midnight Boys and what is happening in our culture. And the fact that we have things that are being made for us as adult men and women that is often meant to just scratch that pleasure impulse from being 8, 12, 10 years old. And so that's another crisis that is happening where it's like,
Baby
just go
shit,
back to
yes.
being a kid. Everything is safe there
Yeah.
where you can use your imagination and be free. What's really weird about this is that half of the people who desperately need to be reconnected just work like in corporate finance. Like there are 3 different people who work in a tall skyscraper who are like, what they really need to feel better is they get their if back in their
That's
life,
true.
which I guess that's just a function of following the strand of one of the B plots of the movie. But I found that very odd.
What was the B plot?
Where the
With the
Bobby
bakery?
Moynihan character
Oh, that's
needing
right.
to reconnect with Blue, the Steve Carell voiced animated
Right.
character.
And
And then that takes us up into this skyscraper. And then like the woman who's like the secretary, the receptionist
Yeah.
she also needed to reconnect with
Well,
her if
let's
at the end of the movie.
rewind.
Yeah.
The way that like Blue, the big purple looking guy, has to reconnect is like, we need to remind him of his childhood. So the girl's just like, remember croissants?
It's
And I'm like, what?
That is, if you haven't seen this movie, that probably sounds crazy what Charles just said, but that is literally what
Because
happens.
it's also literally Proust, but it's like Proust for 2-year-olds.
But like, croissants are in every bakery in America. Like, did Bobby Moynihan forget about
the smell
croissants?
of this is what is going to give Bobby Moynihan the ability to remember Blue and go in there and nail his presentation.
His
They
parents
didn't
were
look like good
bakers.
croissants either. Like, this isn't one
I
of those
know.
like hole in the wall, like Brooklyn bakeries where you're just like, oh, they tried. I'm just like, this is some fucking slop in Manhattan that was baked hours ago.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh my gosh, I remember.
Also, they're let into the waiting room because this 12-year-old is like, I'm responsible for a delivery. And so then they're just letting a 12-year-old
And
sit
she
in this
just sits down
corporate
in a
lobby
seat.
and just like opens the thing of croissants.
Well, it made
then-
more sense.
which is not how corporations normally greet strangers.
Well, in a post 9/11 world, I will say that working in New York for many years, I'm just like, because we realize, spoiler alert, that Ryan Reynolds, they sixth sense us, he's not there. I'm like, there is no way a child is going to be let into this building just talking to the secretary be like, fuck off, kid, leave. Which is also weird because the whole time they're just like, Ryan Reynolds, he's just here, but no one's talking. And I was just like, they're going to make 2 choices.
yeah.
Either because the whole time I'm like, Jonathan Krasinski is weirdly doing a Ryan Reynolds impression this entire time.
Mhm.
So I'm like,
I had
Is-
the same thought.
I'm just like, is it going to be revealed that it's either his imaginary friend or the girls? And by the end, they're like, oh no, Ryan Reynolds was a clown imaginary friend that you had forever. And I was like, wait, so are you going to explain who the old woman is who lives on the top floor of this apartment and the room that she's just going into every single night? And they just don't.
The logic doesn't make sense. I mean, this is a little girl whose imaginary friend is a grown adult man. Like,
Well, it's
what?
her dad. I mean, that's the thing.
But
It's like,
why doesn't it look like John Krasinski then? Why does it look like Ryan Reynolds? I know they look alike.
Well,
If
but
my
I mean,
daughter's
it's like-
Just make it
imaginary
John
friend was
Krasinski.
Ryan Reynolds, I would have to be like, we need to have a conversation.
Also, her dad is alive. Like, why is
Well, I
her
think it's
dad her
supposed to
imaginary friend?
It's like she's projecting some of her fear about what if she loses her dad, so
Right.
she has to have.
But
I
when
don't think it makes sense. I'm just saying. I was like, I understand the doubling that they're
but
here.
the imaginary friend was a clown when she was a little kid that just looked like Ryan Reynolds. Like, what were they like? I really doesn't feel like they thought this one through. Like, I actually don't know what they're trying to
Should have
show
been
us.
two Jonathan Krasinskis. then.
Exactly. If that was what they wanted, I think you're right that that's what they're trying to indicate. That they're like, there's this fear of losing your father. There's this strong connection
Yeah.
between this daughter and this father. I find that very touching. If my daughter, when I wasn't there, was thinking of me, that would be beautiful to me.
If she thought you were a clown, though.
But she
she's-
does think I'm a clown. That's part of our agreement.
but
so
yeah,
I get that
but
idea.
in a
But why
different
is it
way.
Ryan Reynolds? I don't understand.
Yeah, it was the Ryan Reynolds of it all, because I'm just like, it's not even like he's hot Ryan Reynolds. It's like he's just like middle-aged Ryan Reynolds. And I was
Yeah.
just like, why? Because she was young. So I was like, did she see a Ryan Reynolds movie when she was young? She's just like, this guy's now my imaginary friend.
I don't think that she's like Deadpool is my imaginary
she-
friend. She's just like projecting like a version of a white guy who is like pretty similar.
But
to,
every-
I think you guys are bringing some like Ryan Reynolds like Deadpool to
No,
this.
no,
I
no.
was like,
no,
it's just
Ryan
another
Reynolds is bringing
mid-mobile
it to the
guy.
movie.
You know what
because
I'm saying?
Every third joke, he's like, bet you're wondering how I got here. Like, he's doing Ryan Reynolds things. He's not doing a performance
but
of
so
a
does
magical
John
guy.
Krasinski.
His is a little bit more saccharine. The Ryan Reynolds thing is like he like really wants to drop an F-bomb in this movie and knows he's not allowed to. Like, it's really
Yes.
edging towards like when because there's a lot of jokes. This movie is trying to have it both ways. Like, it's trying to do this very sweet, thoughtful, emotional up style thing. Michael Giacchino does the score to this movie.
Yeah.
It's shot by fucking Janusz Kaminski, Steven Spielberg cinematographer.
Who also did Bill's like first grade like kid
Yes, he
portrait
did.
once.
He did. And
So,
also
okay,
shot Jerry Maguire.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
Right,
There's
so
like
that's a good point. He
Yeah.
knows from shooting kids' work.
Exactly.
That's a good
You
point.
know, he has experience.
Anyway, it's meant to be this very beautiful thing, but it's also trying to be this post-Pixar, like every joke is a meta joke about pop culture, and a lot of the jokes are here for adults. Like, there's a joke
What
about
were
how
the
all the
jokes?
ifs are in therapy together, and they're all talking about their pain. It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that joke is for 5-year-olds? That's weird.
Yeah.
Like, there is a lot of what
Forgot
Ryan
about
Reynolds
that.
says in the interviews with the other ifs, where he's trying to find matches for them, are they're contemporary jokes. It's Awkwafina, it's George Clooney, it's
Right.
Bradley Cooper, it's Matt Damon. It's all of these characters who are playing on their own famous personas and their own famous voices. Those are jokes for adults. They're not really for kids. So I thought some of the character design was pretty good, considering they were trying to do entirely original characters. It's not like an absolute disaster of a movie, but it is one of the first in a long time of, I don't really know who this was for. And so it's got me thinking harder about this movie than I ever should have thought about it while watching it.
Yeah. You did turn to me and you were like, first of all, who is this for? Is this for 7-year-olds? And then you asked me whether you thought your daughter would like it, who has more sophisticated film tastes than the young people in my life and does like have some sort of imaginary connection.
She does. I mean, she
has an
definitely,
imagination.
she has a huge imagination, but most of her imagination is drawn from characters she's seen before. So like I mentioned on the pod recently, she's obsessed with Pocahontas and John Smith. So like she wakes up and
It's
she's
real
like,
tough. Yeah.
she's like, Dad, I saw John Smith last night in my dream, and we have to go find him. And she's like, wants me to take her out of the crib to go find John Smith. I was at a parent-teacher conference, and they were like, Alice has got a lot of stories about John Smith. And I was like, Alice, John Smith is a white colonizer. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
I really think
Ooh.
But this is the power of
It's-
Disney,
yeah.
you know? This is what Disney can do that If cannot.
Sean, just really quick. There's just been there's like Disney Plus is great for the family home, I have heard.
Oh,
Of
it's
all
incredible.
of the just kind of work we've done, just trying to show people like, hey, instead of making movies about colonizers, we got Moana, we got this. How did Pocahontas, like how did that get
I
into
was
this?
actually thinking about this yesterday. Is like, talk me through the decision tree that led to putting Pocahontas on?
Well, honestly, she loves Moana. A lot of the contemporary movies she loves too. It's just one of those things where because of the wonder of Disney Plus, when you finish a movie, the tiles pop up and they're like, what about these movies? And this is a true story. My wife was at her college reunion and I was with Alice over a long weekend, just the two of us. A little more TV used that weekend than we normally would use. And I forget what it is that we finished watching. Maybe Sleeping Beauty, which was a huge hit.
Ooh.
Sleeping Beauty ended. As soon as it ended, would you like to watch Pocahontas? And Alice was like, who is that?
Oh,
What is that?
Oh, yeah.
And then as soon as that happens, you can't get out of it. There's
That
no
is true.
escape.
Yeah.
So
So it's the algorithm.
it was the
the
algorithm.
algorithm, basically what you're saying, the algorithm incepted your child to fall in love with a colonizer. This is the type of shit
Yeah.
that we would usually talk about on the Midnight Boys.
I mean, but it's true for all of our culture. You know what I mean? Like it touches children's entertainment and touches everything. So anyway, she does have a very active imagination. I think she would be bewildered by this movie. It's too adult for a toddler. I don't know. I mean, the movie on Thursday, the box office projection was $40 million. And then on Saturday, they're like, whoa. Turns out more like 30. And then it finished, I think, at 34,
Yeah.
which is, for an original children's movie is not terrible, but it feels like this is ultimately a bit of a disappointment. There are so many things. I mean, Krasinski's desire to make the movie, I find very strange given where he was at in his career with A Quiet Place and Jack Ryan. It's like, this feels like a weird big step back for him. We don't know who it's for. The stakes are illusory because we don't really know how sick or not sick her dad is.
And luckily, it turns out, I mean, I was happy he wasn't that sick.
That would
He
have
was
been quite a
okay.
stroke if she just like.
I will say, like, being completely honest, I did not enjoy this movie, didn't believe in it. And also when she was like running to the hospital to see him, and all the friends were there, I teared up because I can't like help it.
Because Giacchino was cooking.
Yeah,
Because he was
well,
like,
and,
what I have is the
oh.
up juice that I'm going to drizzle on top of this score that I've written. Because he knows how to get to that
Yeah.
place in your
You
brain
were
with his
crying and
music.
I was laughing.
Yeah, but
I thought it was
like,
very funny.
I couldn't help it, and I was like, I knew that I shouldn't be crying, but there was some sort of like mom reflex, and so I was tearing up. But I would have been really mad if he died. That would have been worse.
That would have been a misstep. I mean,
I was a little bit, and this is probably because I don't have children and I also
Yeah.
still have writer brain, where I was just like, damn, sis, we should have structured this whole entire story you're telling to your dying father, because like you kind of, the way she was going into it, she didn't really have the clear structure. She wasn't giving me a hook. It was just a lot of rambling, and I'm like, this man's about to fucking die. And then when he woke up, I was like, okay, it was a shitty story, but it didn't kill him.
Right.
I kind of zoned out when she was telling him the story.
I did as well, but I think it was supposed to be like the big key to understanding the movie, so I was like trying to follow it.
Yeah.
But it is one of those things where it's like, when you're paying attention, but you're also not. Yeah.
Yes.
It couldn't hold it.
Do you guys see in your own children any, you're just like, they're going to be a future editor or writer, or you like, we're stomping that out right now?
It's a generous question. It's too early to tell. I think what you realize is temperament.
Yeah.
And temperament indicates what you will be good at and what you'll be drawn to and what you won't be good at and what you won't be drawn to.
Knox seems like he's way too energetic. He's just like, bro, I'm not sitting at a desk.
Yeah.
I'm a man of the world.
It's hard to imagine him sitting anywhere for any length of time. But like, and I say this with love, and I think he's a really brilliant child. Like right now, I'm just like, will Knox learn to read?
Oh,
and like,
no.
and like he will.
That's ridiculous.
He will, but it's like, I'm not, I realized like, I think he knows some of the alphabet, but he hasn't shown the inclination to sit down and learn it. And I have not shown the will to be like, I'm going to sit you down and make you do A, B, C, and then D. So
he just turned 2.
only
It's not
time
really that big of a deal.
time will tell. I
feel like he has time. Like I feel like he can surprise you.
And he learns a lot on his own, and that's really nice. So he surprised me with what he does know, which is maybe just my expectations are too low. But he knows words to songs. He learns things independently. So maybe that's what I'm discovering about him.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I believe in Knox. Alice?
She's very smart, but very strong-willed. And so she is showing signs of being a fantasy. So we're trying to support that while also evolving it so she doesn't turn out like her dad. I have high hopes, but I have no desire to put any pressure on her to do anything. So which would be different from the way that I was raised.
Yeah.
So that's, This is
This movie is for you.
It's interesting to watch. Like I thought this was a fascinating Rorschach test to your question earlier. It did get me thinking about what I'm doing, but it didn't have any lessons. You know what I mean? It didn't really show me the light on anything. Not that a movie like this should be expected to, but you can't help whilst watching a brown-haired, 6-foot-tall, white father do things with a young girl with their daughter. Like, what ultimately is the takeaway at the end of this movie? Like you were asking it, I don't know. I don't know. Is it just retain some wonder in your life?
You unfortunately chose to go to the bathroom during a pivotal scene in which Fiona Shaw, as the grandmother, is through music reconnected with her inner child and her imaginary friend, her if. I think it's telling that I refuse to use the terminology. Played or voiced by Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Quite a run she's on right now.
Yeah. And then they dance together with a view of the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan skyline, which is perfectly out the window. And that is her connecting with her if and her inner child. But we don't really see what that gives her.
That was I was confused because like when they're becoming their inner children again, they start lighting up.
Yes.
But like for a while, they never do the thing where they're like, oh, my imaginary friend. So it's just like she just like dances and then like
it's like they touched her heart.
But then at the end, the little girl and John Krasinski go home happy. And Fiona Shaw turns to the Phoebe Waller-Bridge character and is like, shall we? Or whatever. So
they're communicating.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess
now
that's
Fiona
what you're
Shaw's stuck with the entire living thing. I'm like, she's an old woman. Like what? I mean, I guess maybe the if can go to the grocery store.
The if can make tea. She does. She repeatedly makes tea throughout the movie.
But if I'm an old, I don't want to take care of a living thing.
Maybe it's going to take care of her.
That's even more depressing.
Well, that is really true. And that gets into the elder care, which this movie doesn't go into. Maybe that's if too.
Fiona Shaw was not a great caregiver. I will say
that. It did seem like the young girl was out till all hours of the night with ifs. And her grandmother was not looking after her. That was troubling. Did you have an imaginary child as a kid? Imaginary friend as a child?
Oh, no. I don't think my parents were, like, going for that shit. When I was born, I just think I had realized, I'm like, damn, the world's rough. There's no imaginary friends. I would be the person being like, fuck Santa. Santa's not real. That's my mom and dad eating those cookies. So just no.
Oh, yeah.
Did you?
No, not like born like full cloth. I was like Alice mode, but I was the one of the Von Trapp kids. I was.
Who was your colonizer of choice?
That's a great question.
You're more of a Columbus fan, yeah.
I mean, Captain Von Trapp is like ultimately on the right side, but like, what was the Austrian Navy up to beforehand? Who can say? I don't know if it was like great stuff.
You were playing as a child with the Von Trapps. It sounds like a nightmare.
I really liked that movie. I don't know what to tell you.
Fantasy?
Yeah, I don't think I invented any characters. I definitely had an active imagination and was really into my worlds. Star Wars, He-Man, Transformers, G.I. Joe. I can remember being 3-4 years old and being really locked in on all that stuff and then getting into comic books, which we've talked about before. So I think I loved those worlds, but I don't remember being like, hey, Steve, let's go for a walk. That never happened to me.
Do you actually, and that's why I was like, who is this movie for? Because I think what happened, like imaginary friends make a lot more sense when it's just like, oh, you can watch Huckleberry Hound or like Yogi Bear. I'm just like, these are cool, but that's just a bear and a dog.
Yeah.
And then like Star Wars and shit happens and we're just like inundated with such cool shit. Disney, princesses, everything. When I'm a kid, to your point, I'm like, I remember like playing like I'm a Jedi. Those were like my imaginary friends. And this movie, I was like, do kids still like in a Fortnite world where Naruto is just like doing a crep walk next to Superman? I don't think kids are like, you know what? I have a ballerina that's just my friend. That's so boring.
I think that is true.
Yeah. So you're saying iPads killed imaginary friends?
IP. I think big
IP.
IP just kind of just zapped that
Interesting.
part of us.
Yeah, I mean, I buy that. Speaking of IP, shall we talk about Back to Black?
Absolutely.
That's a rude but true segue.
So this movie actually bombed hard this weekend. I don't know if you saw it. Made like $2 million.
Wait, what?
That is crazy how, I mean, it opened wide.
Well, it does seem like they just absolutely gave up
They
on it.
punted on it.
Yeah.
Because it's done pretty well in England.
Well, yeah.
What does that mean?
I don't know. They have different media standards and different
Are you beefing with the Englishman?
Listen. I don't think like the tabloid press in the UK like helped this situation.
This
Do
is
you?
fair. Oh,
Yeah.
no.
So,
This new film is effectively not a cradle to grave, but a 20 through 27 profile of Amy Winehouse, beloved late singer-songwriter. It's directed by Sam Taylor Johnson. It stars Marissa Abela from Industry as Amy Winehouse, Jack O'Connell, Eddie Marsan, and Leslie Manville. I'm very critical of movies like this on the show. We both are. We have been for a long time.
well, I can like them if they do it well, but hard no. They did not do this well.
I think I have a pretty good handle on what happened here, but I think we should explore it.
Can you give me just the top level? Because like I went into this movie cold, and I'm just like, I have my theories, but as the big brain, what do you think actually happened?
Well, it feels like a movie controlled by an estate that wants to reset the narrative of what Amy Winehouse's life was and also remove culpability from what may have happened. That's what it feels like. In 2015, Asif Kapadia directed an incredible documentary called Amy, which won an Academy Award for Best Documentary. It is a kind of
and it's available on Max right now.
You can stream it. I would recommend
Yeah.
you stream it. It is a fascinating portrait of her life. It is a very sad story, but one of the things that it does so well is it shows the incredible intersection of her life and her songwriting. It shows the ways in which those two things influenced each other and they bore out. Obviously, Amy Winehouse struggled with addiction. She, at times in public, there was like a sense of fear and a scare around how she was living her life, but also you could see that pain was being, transmuted into work. This movie, it feels like a series of like axe grindings or like quote unquote clarifications around things that we learned in the documentary. And so if you watch them side by side, you can be like, oh, wow, it seems like somebody wants to make clear that what was indicated here, which is this kind of prismatic portrait, a series of voices talking in the documentary about Amy's life, including Amy's voice. And then this movie, which seems to is announcing that it is giving Amy Winehouse a kind of agency in telling the story from her perspective, but instead seems to be offloading responsibility from her father, Mitch, and from Blake Fielder Civil, who was her partner for a long stretch of time when she was famous. And so you get this movie that on the one hand features the music of Amy Winehouse, which is excellent, that features Marissa Abela trying really hard to transform into somebody if you were a fan of hers, you have a very clear vision in your mind's eye of what she was, what she looked like, what she sounded like.
A very singular presence, voice, look.
Yes.
And also she was like covered extensively in the media. So if you were following it, like you almost recognize the footage and what they're trying to recreate.
Yes. There are a couple of moments from the documentary that they're trying to completely recreate.
Yeah.
Or award show moments or things like that. So there's crossover there, but the point of view and the energy is very different. And this movie does a couple things that I thought were just really strange. One, it doesn't really spend a whole lot of time showing her writing or recording music.
There's an entire scene where I was like, this whole movie, I was just like, when are we getting to Back to Black? Back to Black. That's why I'm here. Like, I was just like, I had punted already on this being a good movie. I'm like, but I get to hear Amy's music loud and just seeing her create this. And quite literally, the entire Back to Black is she's just like, she leaves and you can kind of tell her grandmother's going to die. They have an entire montage sequence of her being sad, walking through New York. And then just the album is made.
And also, so they're playing, literally, they play the song Back to Black. And I think that's, Marissa Abela does
She sings,
in this. And listen, you can't recreate Amy's voice, but like she's trying, you know?
This was a real test of your rule, though. Because
no. Well, but I bring that up because like she's not a bad singer. Like you have to, she tried, but then they play the original, they play the back to black recording. And you're like, okay, so that is actually Amy's voice. And it has just sort of that like undefinable, timbre to it that is what made her so great. So you finally get to hear the music. But then they send her to New York where she doesn't interact with anyone else.
No Mark Ronson, no nothing.
Right. It's they are also like recreating the scenes described in the lyrics of the song Back to Black word for word, which was when I was just like, oh my God, who let this happen?
It's rough.
Why? And then I believe it's also that montage where the crack ex machina appears and she starts doing like much harder drugs, but it's like it is quite literally in close up. There is just absolutely no context. You don't know when she started it, why she started it, where she got it, where she is using it, what the circumstances are that led to it. It is just, there's like no narration. It is just like suddenly hard drugs appeared. Who can say how or why or what happened or even like why even Amy like got down that path, there's just absolutely no responsibility. And then and then things turn. I was flabbergasted.
To the movie's point, they're just like, hey, Amy might be taking hard drugs, but we're going to throw in this little scene where a young black girl runs up to her and be like, you're my hero. And we just see like Amy buying alcohol and she's like signing an autograph on the back of her receipt. And it's like, I was like, does this movie like Amy Winehouse? Or it's like, I was just like, who let it just... I went back to watch the documentary and I'm just like, Amy in that documentary, there's a softness to her and all the people around her is just like, yeah, like she's very charismatic, but there is a thing where it's just like, she's a very sensitive soul. And I was like, this movie, Marissa, like she's trying, but they get none of that across.
And they don't want to touch any of like the complications. I also went back and rewatched the documentary and it does a lot of things more specifically, but there's this one anecdote. It's one of her friends in voiceover, and it's after the Grammys, when she wins Record of the Year, and she's in London, and I vividly remember she's like on satellite, and her friend says like right after that moment, Amy like pulled her up and says to her, "This is so boring without drugs," and which is just like. Heartbreaking and so sad, but like this is a person who struggled with addiction, who struggled with bulimia, like who had a lot of things going on herself. And not only is the movie like trying to remove blame from her father and from Blake, but also trying to remove it from herself. Like it's like we're not going to touch that this was a person, like a very talented, complicated person with like a lot of stuff going on. They're just like there were no problems except for that her grandmother died and then like her ex-boyfriend had a baby.
Yeah, I think the movie is trying to find one emotional logic endpoint to explain her pain, which is that she had always wanted to be a mother and that when she and Blake could no longer be together, that effectively ended her ability to do that, or they couldn't conceive, or whatever the movie is trying to insinuate about their relationship. But Amy Winehouse was 27 when she died. I mean, the truth is that she had an awful addiction that took her life. Trying to like single-handedly psychologize that is impossible in a movie. And we already have a documentary in which people who were in her life are walking us through some of those feelings. So
she also in rewatching the documentary and also in watching Black to Black, I was really struck by a lot of this is happening at the same time as Britney Spears in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done all of the Britney stuff many times over, and like, I guess we're somewhere better, but that's still very complicated. But watching it again, the role of the tabloids, like the amount of exposure and what that does to someone is made very clear in the documentary. And because this is a piece of media about Amy Winehouse, the movie basically avoids that as well. There are a couple.
There's one or two scenes.
There's one, and then oh my God! But that one scene where they get in a scuffle with her, they like do this like lingering like paper bag and American Beauty close up of the ballet flat, which I was like,
oh man, that
and
was
the
when
whole
I was
time
like,
I
I'm
had been
done.
like, where are the ballet flats? Honestly, like, what are you doing? And then that's what they decided to do. I was very upset.
I mean, does this even like, maybe this is my music critic brain, where I was just like, the documentary does a very good job of being like, no, Amy, she trains in jazz. Like they're
Yeah.
showing all of the musicians, whether it's Questlove or Tony Bennett or Yasin Bey, being like, no, she was actually like
Right.
really into this music. She was like, Questlove was like, yo, she was sending me records that I hadn't heard. And I was just like, this movie also does a terrible job of even kind of showing you how talented she was as a musician.
Totally.
It's just like, oh no, the music is just made. And I'm like, the music wasn't made in a vacuum. They spent so much time on being like, yo, you guys want more Blake stories? And I'm like, fuck Blake. Like, I'm like, can you
Right.
show her making any music ever?
Okay,
Yeah.
there's two. The one thing in the movie that I liked is the one thing that I think is the biggest sin. So I think that the extended like meet cute between Blake and Amy in the pub
and the Shangri-Las.
and the Shangri-Las.
When Jack O'Connell is doing
Right.
Leader of the Pack, I was just like, this is, he's
I like
amazing.
that.
But
Right.
that is such a, you're
But-
right,
so
it's
that,
a sin.
That whole sequence
Yeah.
is really, really great because they have great chemistry together. It's like a really interesting origin point of her kind of realizing like who she always wanted to be or is meant to be, is that she needs like another half. That is something we know for real life Amy. Like Blake impacted her profoundly. But the idea that Amy Winehouse doesn't know who the Shangri-Las are, like, is fucking weird.
That is true.
Like, Questlove has given so many interviews where he's like, she put me onto artists. Like,
Yeah.
Questlove's the biggest record dork in the history of time. How does Amy Winehouse, who's already recorded her first album at this point, not know who the Shangri-Las are,
Right.
or Phil Spector, or any of that music? Is fucking nonsense.
I mean, even at that time, there's music happening in Camden, like Liberty, all these like
that
it's
is recalling that era.
Yeah, and I'm just like, it's like she goes and she sees Blake, and I'm just like, no, she's living in a place in Camden that she's just like, it seems like she had a rejuvenation artistically, and the movie's then just like, this could be any neighborhood in fucking England. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
It's just, the movie is really never specific about anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, am I just misremembering this time?
Yeah. Well, you pointed this out too, that the absence of Mark Ronson and Salam Remy only appearing in like 20 seconds of the movie, when they are like, what you want to see in this movie is the same way you want to see like Bohemian Rhapsody get written and recorded in Bohemian Rhapsody. It's like, show me the making of Back to Black. Like, why are we even making this movie?
We have footage of it. Like, I watched the footage of like
that's
Mark
the best
Ronson.
scene in the documentary when she's in the recording booth.
And it is always like, we make fun of music biopics, but like the recent Aretha Franklin biopic that Respect, which was not very good, but like there's the moment in the studio and you're like, oh my God, they're writing Respect and someone's about to do Second to, and you're like, yes, it's always really good.
If you're going to make a bad music biopic, at least give us that one moment.
I mean, I assumed that some of it had to do with legal rights and that like Mark Ronson was like, don't like,
I think you're right.
Get
I don't want to be a part of this.
And and like, don't there are the legal ramifications if you do this. I mean, I'm not saying that Mark Ronson threatened them, and same for Salam Remy. A thing I found out is that one of the producers, Allison Owen, is Lily Allen's mom. And that was one of the reasons that she wanted to do this, is that because she understood the parent perspective of having a child who was like not in the same stratosphere, but like Lily Allen was also in the scene working with Mark Ronson at the same time. And like, what happens when you have a child become super famous? But I did also then wonder if that softened some of the ways that, they presented everything. Like, who can know?
It feels
I mean, the
like,
father is a magical father.
Completely. I was just going to say, it feels like Mitch Winehouse got to fact check this movie. Like, every single thing that he does, and Eddie Marsan, God bless him, I'll like him in anything that he does. He's trying his best as well. But that's a figure that has otherwise been described in the press and throughout the entirety of Amy Winehouse's public life as an enabler and somebody who didn't help her daughter. And in this movie, he's her best friend and the person who always made her feel safe. And that's crazy. I thought I was losing my mind watching the movie. But that's obviously the reason this movie was made. This movie was made because that part of the estate was allowed for it to be made. And, Sam Taylor Johnson is a director that I think like has no style, and every movie is incredibly boring to look at too. And I just thought this really was flat and
Can we talk about the
uninspiring.
ending?
Yes.
Oh,
I gasped aloud in the theater. So it's not, I guess at the point in the movie when this happens, she has already written Tears Dry on Their Own. But the final shot is Amy Winehouse in her like new fancy home that's still being renovated or whatever. And she like extemporizes the part of Tears Dry on Their Own as if she's writing it for the first time, that is releasing Blake from any culpability. And then goes upstairs and there's a shot of the bird that she inherited from Dan. And then cut to Amy Winehouse died at the age of 27 from alcohol poisoning. Like 2 more cards. And then they cut to Marissa Abella, like in the the famous Grammy setup, just doing a real like peppy cover of Tears Dry on Their Own. And that's how they send you out. I texted, I know people are gonna be mad, but I was alone and so upset. I was just in the theater as she was singing, texting Sean, being like, what the fuck is this? Are you kidding me?
I was like, the movie isn't gonna end, because it's like they're doing this thing where they're just like, she learns, because I'm just like, oh, this is disgusting, because she learns before she ascends the stairs. I think it's a paparazzi basically being like,
Yeah.
hey, how do you feel about Blake having a kid? And what the movie is insinuating is essentially that because Amy either could not have children or couldn't have children with Blake or whatever, she basically drank herself to death. And I'm just like,
Right.
how does this get past?
Right. And then they also do a voiceover. There's that. And then they play her voice just saying, I just always wanted people to hear my voice.
Yes.
And then they just do like up-tempo Tears Dry on Their Own. They're like, it's okay because we still have her voice. Like, what?
I was
That's the
like,
worst
this
part.
it was one of the most insane movie choices I've seen in a while.
My favorite Amy Winehouse song is "Some Unholy War,"
Mhm.
and there's a down-tempo version of the song that you can find on the Amy soundtrack, and it's on like the expanded editions of Back to Black, and it's like a collision of the 2 Amy Winehouse albums. It's like the jazziness of the first record, and then the like real torch song, like profound emotional depth on the second album. And that song's super important because it's like, this is a person who actually was tortured by her like inability to be loved and to love herself. Like that's ultimately what the Amy Winehouse tragedy is. And the movie is like, what a fun song we have here at the end of this movie. Like,
It's insane.
It's crazy.
I couldn't believe it.
It really doesn't hit the note that you want it to hit at all.
Marissa was also wildly miscast.
Yeah.
It was, because
Yeah.
I love her on Industry.
She's so
like,
good on
she's
Industry.
Wonderful on Industry.
Yeah.
But I was like, to
That's
your
hard,
point, it's
yeah.
like, even when you see Amy in the documentary, it's just like, she has such a singular face and her cheeks and the way she moves, and it was almost like Marissa was doing a reenactment of how I remember the paparazzi and the tabloids
Yeah.
kind of positioning Amy. And I was like, how did she come to this performance? Like this, it
It's
was
tough.
really bad.
It's
Even
tough.
the wig, the whole, it wasn't great.
Yeah, it's really disappointing. I'm not selling my Marissa Abella stock, but also the world doesn't want this. It's unusual to get a movie like this so soon, 10 years later after someone has died. Like The Doors, for example, was like 15 or 20 years
Right.
after the death of Jim Morrison. That's a similar kind of a figure. I guess we've seen Last Days, which was sort of a Kurt Cobain movie that Gus Van Sant made, but we haven't really had a proper Kurt Cobain. Like if you go through the list of people who've died young, who were musical artists,
Right.
like I guess we've had a Tupac movie. I guess we've had a Biggie movie.
We have
those
had a
were
Biggie movie.
those were in
Wait, what
somewhat.
was the Tupac movie?
Wasn't there a Tupac? I don't know if I ever saw it. Hold on.
I might have, yeah, it's probably so bad that I blacked it out.
Yeah, All Eyes on Me with Demetrius Shipp Jr., who
Yeah, I blocked
looks
that one out.
exactly like Tupac. You don't know this movie?
No.
It was directed by Benny Boom, the music video director. Check out All Eyes on Me when you get home. It's not good. This is a very odd thing. It seems like people that just didn't want it. They
And it
weren't
does also
interested.
seem like, at least in the US, they completely gave up on it promo wise.
Yeah.
But
they haven't
aren't we
been
getting
anywhere.
more? I think we're going to get more of this, because it's like everything around Amy watching this movie, I'm just like, oh, the chances of us getting the Mac Miller version of this
Oh God.
are
God.
very, very high.
Yeah.
Just because I think artists get more popular faster than ever. And when they die, it's just like everything that happened with like Tupac and Biggie. I think the media and everyone has kind of learned and crystallized, how do we like keep these figures alive in everyone's mind? And I was like, when I was watching this, I'm like, to your point, I'm like, I don't actually know if enough time has passed for them to do this version of the movie correctly. Like, I'm just like, I still have too much of the time. So when I was watching this, I'm like, that's not how any of this felt.
Well,
Yeah.
to Amanda's point about the tabloid stuff, it doesn't really feel like our culture has changed all that much when it
No.
comes to that sort of thing, too. So, the first movie that Sam Taylor Johnson directed, which was also written by Matt Greenlay, it was Nowhere Boy, which is about like the early life of John Lennon. And you could at least say in 2009 when that movie was made, that's like 50 years later, and
Yeah.
the world had changed significantly. So you're showing us a time that maybe we've forgotten about or we don't understand. In Back to Black, it's like this could
Yeah.
have been yesterday. Like it could have been a year ago. Like,
Arguably, things have just gotten, I was like, oh, things have just gotten worse with
Right,
tabloid culture.
right.
Where I was
Yeah.
just like, oh, it was bad for Amy. I'm like, if Amy was still popping now, I'm just like, she
No,
would just
it's
log on to
just-
Twitter or Instagram and be like, everyone's still mad at me.
yeah,
Yeah.
everyone hates me. Yeah.
I don't recommend looking at Blake Fielder Sybil's Instagram, which is not verified, but I'm pretty sure it's him. And that's
Is it grim?
he is both like posting photos of him with Amy in like a nostalgic way and also being like, it's not my fault. Like even now, it's tough stuff.
I won't be logging onto that.
I will just say for the audience, I want to give a shout out to the Midnight Mob and the Midnight Writers. Usually I'm like Squidward looking at you guys,
Yeah.
SpongeBob, Patrick, having fun. You guys get to watch movies that are aspiring to be art. And after the 3 movies we watched this week, I'm just like, damn, maybe X-Men 97 wasn't that bad. Maybe this stuff is.
I mean, if you want to put X-Men 97 against Unfrosted, we can do it right now.
Ugh. Lead us into Unfrosted, Sean.
So, Unfrosted is the new film from Jerry Seinfeld. Perhaps you've heard of him. This film is now available on Netflix. I'll give you a very brief description of what this movie is about. In
Yeah.
1963 Michigan, business rivals Kellogg's and Post compete to create a cake that could change breakfast forever. That cake, of course, would eventually become the Pop-Tart. This is a movie about the war to design and create the Pop-Tart. What? But why? What? So, okay. The movie itself is an attempt, I think, to revive 2 kinds of movies at the same time. The first kind of movie is the kind of cameo-laden, quote-unquote, star-studded, spoofy, high-energy, airplane-style, Zucker-Abrams 70s and 80s comedy. The other thing that it's trying to do, which is obviously in the same lineage but has a slightly different tonality, even if it has some Zucker-Abrams in it, is the like scary movie or epic movie or superhero movie version of spoof movie culture. In this case, it's done 60 years ago in Michigan
About
about
corporations.
breakfast corporations.
Right.
Fake corporations. I guess the thing that I was just wondering, I was like, how does this
Are they
move-
fake? I thought
No, they're
it's
real.
Kellogg's and
They're-
Post
No,
they're
no,
are
no,
real.
no. I mean, but like the fake story. Like
Yeah,
none
yeah,
of
it's
these
a fake
people
story, yeah.
are real. Like you just have a bunch of like actors being like, oh no, Jerry Seinfeld was like, I'm not doing any research. All of this, I'm just making up the fictional creation of the Pop-Tart, which is like kind of, I was like, this is essentially the same tree as the Hot Cheetos story, where it's just like,
well, yeah, it's like Hot Cheetos, but then it's like the Mattel parts of Barbie
yes.
married with air. Like, but
but none of those movies, the Barbie and Mattel stuff is the closest tonally to what this
Yeah.
movie's trying to do, but it is.
with also a little bit of 30 Rock. But I guess
think that's very generous, but
well,
sure.
but just no, but it's not funny. But in the sense of like we're making jokes about the corporate ownership of and like the larger structure of this thing that
Right.
we're like not totally taking seriously, and we're like winking at it.
Right. Well, okay, so I guess just as an explanation point, obviously Jerry Seinfeld, the co-creator of the TV show Seinfeld, one of the signature components of his stand-up comedy over the years, and this is represented in the show, is that he's really interested in breakfast. He loves cereal. He has a lot of jokes and bits about cereal. You could always see cereal boxes in his apartment, in the TV show. For whatever reason, this is one of his things. So I assume that is ultimately what led to the interest in the creation of this film, which I guess you could say is about like the ways that corporate imagination are constantly trying to reinvent ways to make money, and that the idea that Netflix, a company that spent the last 20 years trying to find a way to reinvent how we get our entertainment, only to double back and introduce advertising and live programming and making it seem like it was 20 years ago. There's something kind of sweetly and probably not purposefully ironic about that. But the actual movie, when you sit down to watch it, you're like, what the fuck is this? Like, who wants this? Who is it for?
I have no idea. Also, like, are Kellogg's or whatever Kellogg's like multinational is called now and Post involved in this?
I don't know.
I couldn't find any information, but I was like, okay, so I'm watching a commercial, but they're being like good sports about it, so that's supposed to make me like the Pop-Tart more. Like, what is going on?
I mean, here's the thing. I will say, at various points watching this, I was high, and I did think that like the little white children in the dumpster,
they were funny.
I was just like,
they were the best part.
I was like, this should just be a movie about the dumpster kids eating like Rice Krispies from the trash.
That was literally the best part.
Yeah. I also liked it when he has to go back to NASA to recruit, is it Melissa McCarthy?
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing like moon landing trainings, and there's like the alien interactions training and all the scenarios with the alien. That was funny. Like the alien is, I laughed at that. Well, it was good physical comedy.
Well, who also
the alien is stoned or whatever. It was funny.
Who shot this movie? Because Don, like, they do a whole extended Mad Men bit where I'm just like, I'm sorry. Why? What are you doing with my beloved Don Draper? The suit looks terrible. This joke is like, this wouldn't have been funny on SNL 10 years ago. Why are we doing this? There were multiple points where I'm just like, oh no, this is an SNL skit that has just been strung along for 90 minutes. And there are so many stars in this. I was like, did not one of these comedians be like, what the fuck is this movie? Like, what are we doing?
I regret to inform you that this film was shot by Bill Pope, who is the cinematographer of The Matrix, among many other wildly successful films.
Then why does the movie look like that?
I think that's how they want it to look. I mean, I think the production design is very purposeful, and that's really the thing. It's meant to be a kind of like pop art, real but fake recreation of the 1960s. And it's also meant to have that feeling like in Scary Movie where you're like, this is a set. Like, I think we're on a set here. We're not in a real world. And so you're never meant to let your mind go beyond, we're in a jokey space. Like, it wants you to feel like there's nothing real about what's transpiring, as opposed to the work that Bill Pope did in, I don't know. I mean, he's Sam Raimi and the Wachowskis cinematographer for years and years and years. He shot Gridlocked, the Tupac movie with Fondy Curtis Hall made. Like, so this is an enormously capable cinematographer. It's just like, this is the movie that they wanted to make. They clearly made the movie they wanted to make. Also, to your point about Mad Men, I think if you were like, oh, this is like an upstart independent film that's trying to mock these kinds of movies. But the stars of this movie are Jerry Seinfeld, Melissa McCarthy, Hugh Grant, Amy Schumer, Peter Dinklage, Christian Slater, Bill Burr, James Marsden. Like,
I was upset when Hugh Grant showed up as Tony the Tiger. I was like, listen, I know he has like 5 children, but, and you know,
whoa, don't movie critics, guys, stop pocket watching, okay? First you do it with Coppola, now we're doing it with Grant.
Listen,
why can't he just collect a check?
No, I know he has I understand, but I didn't want him to take this check necessarily.
So it's been Oompa
Loompa.
Loompas.
I thought he was very funny.
And
as
Tony
Oompa
the
Loompa.
Tiger.
Yeah.
That's your man. That's your guy.
Yeah, and also a bunch of serial killers.
What's going on with Hugh Grant? Is he okay?
Like I said, I do believe that he has 5 children. That he had pretty late in life. So sometimes you need money for that.
I'm looking at his wiki, and one of the subcategories is political views. What's happening in that space?
Oh yeah. Oh, listen, you got to follow him on Twitter. My guy has the best old white guy Twitter. He vociferously against Brexit and is really upset by the current British government. And he's also led all the charge into all the tabloid phone hacking because he was hacked.
I am not a Lib Dem, a Tory, a Laborite, or anything in particular, but I recognize political guts.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's really elite stuff. So he tweets about that, and then he tweets about how movie cinemas are really loud. He says cinemas because he's British. And then like various concerts he takes his kids to. I think he enjoyed the Blackpink concert.
This guy is on a
for him.
run right now.
Yeah.
He is on an incredible run. Since 2015, here's what he's done. The Man from U.N.C.L.E., wonderful movie.
Yeah.
Florence Foster Jenkins, didn't like it.
Meryl Streep.
Paddington 2, everybody loves it. 2019, The Gentleman. Guy Ritchie.
Yeah, listen, that worked out.
Sure. 2022, he had a cameo in Glass Onion and Knives Out Mystery. 2023, this is legendary stuff. Operation Fortune Ruse de Guerre, the most recent Guy Ritchie movie before
this movie.
The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, which we have not yet talked about on the show, which we will. Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves, Wonka, and Unfrosted.
As I said.
No pocket watching on big pick.
All right. What's your relationship to Jerry Seinfeld?
Complicated, because because I've started realizing this. I'm just like, Charles, you are among the last generation who remembers not being able to pick the TV. Like, it was just like Seinfeld would just be on, and I'm like, all right, who are these old people? And then I'd be like, this is the greatest show ever. And then I get into Curb, love it. And now we're at a point where, let's just say, among my generation, Jerry Seinfeld is not that popular.
It's not
every single time
not
he
where
does
you want to be.
an interview, people be quoting and be like, guys, search Jerry Seinfeld, 17-year-old. And I'm like, it's so funny how you have Larry David, who I feel like Q rating is through the fucking roof. People are like, all right, Larry David, he's our guy. We love him. And Jerry Seinfeld has kind of become the like, either he's doing some shit with cars and drive-ins and diners, or he's making Unfrosted. And I'm like, I feel like you're better than this.
Did you watch Comedians in Cars?
I saw some episodes.
Did you like it?
It was okay. You know, it was sort of like, it was before carpool karaoke, right?
I think
but
so.
It was like in that age where sometimes the video on the online video market wasn't like oversaturated, so you would just get like 10 minutes of famous people hanging out. And I don't like, sometimes if I like the famous people, I don't mind it, but I don't care that much about comedians, respectfully.
Did you have pencils down focus on Seinfeld as a kid, or was it not your thing?
Yeah, totally. Because my parents also loved it, and I was allowed to watch it with them. Seinfeld and Friends was like, that was an important block of television for me. I remember sitting in my friend Drew's living room watching the finale of Seinfeld. I know about Bobka from Seinfeld and love it to this day. So I appreciate everything that they do. But yeah, and reruns too. So there are many situations in the world where I'm like, oh, this is like that Seinfeld episode.
Yeah, it's not unreasonable to say like it is a formative influence on my life, that TV show, that tone of comedy and that simultaneously vitriolic and joyful blend of weirdness that somehow permeated our culture and became the most popular show in America had a huge influence. And it's fascinating that he's basically spent 30 years not doing shit that anybody cares about.
And he wrote and directed this movie, which I was like, this was the one that you were like, I'm coming back, y'all, for the Unfrosted movie. I was like, you didn't want to do an Oscar bait movie. You didn't want to do something like, but at this point, I'm like, 30 years later, I'm like, what does Jerry Seinfeld love? What's like important to him? When I watch Curb, I could be like, oh, I understand Larry David's view on the world. And I am no closer to understanding what Jerry Seinfeld likes besides driving in his car with famous people and breakfast cereals. And I'm like, is that always just what it was?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's that fascinating documentary Comedian from 2002 that he is one of the co-stars of, and he's the executive producer of. And it's like, it's a blended film. It's a film that is about him basically developing a new act and going on the road. And then it's cut against this up-and-coming comedian named Orny Adams and him struggling to become a comedian. And you get this like psychological portrait of these two guys. I think they both come off a little bit unlikable, to be honest with you. Stand-up comedians in general can be a little bit unlikable when shown not on stage. But since then, he's basically done that streaming or that YouTube show that became a streaming show. He's done B-Movie.
Yeah, Charles, where are you on B-Movie?
I'm out on the meme factory on B-Movie.
Okay.
It's just, I don't like thinking about the implications of having sex with a bee? Do you have sex with a bee? I'm just out. I'm out.
Interesting.
Okay.
Okay. So you
So
don't
could
want to
you-
think about bee
is
procreation.
Is that a part of the Bee movie?
No, that has become like the meme, and I don't know if it's on Black Twitter, but it is like a meme now. It's just like, yo, this man, no, she cheated on her man with a bee. Like, oh, she fumbled, like, da-da-da-da. And I'm just
Okay.
like, oh, now I have to think about, like, oh, is my shawty gonna cheat on me with a bee that's voiced by Jerry Seinfeld?
Right. Okay.
You know.
My experience of this movie was also influenced by seeing Jerry Seinfeld on Everybody's in LA, the John Mulaney show. I don't know if you guys watched any of the John Mulaney show on Netflix.
No, that's dadcore, but continue.
I watched some.
Wow,
I
you're right.
watched some clips of it on John Mulaney's various
You
social
watched
media
some
platforms.
clips?
Yeah, because John Mulaney posted them and they get served to me. I'm checking in.
What
with
is your social media diet like?
It's-
You're on Blake's Instagram. You know
Yeah.
about Hugh Grant's political
okay,
views.
well, the Blake thing, I was doing research. That's not being served to me. I want to be clear. That's not where my algorithm is.
You have his account pinned.
And my algorithm on Instagram is very different than my algorithm on Twitter. But I've gotten my Twitter algorithm to a pretty good place where I follow John Mulaney, so he was posting clips, right? But then on the other side, it's just feeding me inside the NBA clips. So
Ooh.
that's my media diet. And on Instagram, I was getting too much increase your protein stuff. So I told it. So I know. So I banned the word protein and I started liking a bunch of videos of cakes. So now
How many protein shakes are you drinking a day? We should have you at 3.
I'm not I don't like shakes. I don't like
Whoa.
liquid
It's
food.
not about the shakes.
I'm not actually
it's not about
looking
the
for
taste.
efficiency. I enjoy eating. So I want to find opportunities to eat things I like rather than having a shake.
How many chicken breasts are we up to?
But I did that is really not sitting with me right now. But I did finally do a protein plate at Sweet Green last week.
Oh,
I didn't
hell
under
yeah.
I have I wish it had more vegetables, but I appreciated the extra protein. Anyway, back to my social media. I muted protein as so you can't no post with the word protein can be served to me. And then I liked a bunch of pictures of cake. So I just have Instagram is all cake and Twitter is everybody in LA clips and inside the NBA clips.
Love this.
I'm thriving.
This is like me, but just faving every Rowdy Piper picture that I see, so I only get served Piper material on Instagram. I don't know how we got there from Unfrosted, but
I mean, before we got off
I don't think we need to go
Seinfeld,
back.
Did you watch Seinfeld on Everybody in LA?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, my point was I saw him on that show, which was a really fun show and a really cool experiment.
Yeah.
And I loved that on the first episode he was like, "We're doing 6 of these and we'll never do another one ever again. So whatever happens, happens, and I don't care." I loved that energy. But Jerry Seinfeld came on and was just like a dickhead. He just wasn't nice and
Yeah.
accommodating. And obviously John Mulaney is hugely influenced by Seinfeld. He's talked about how the show Seinfeld was very influential on him. They have a kind of similar joke writing style. I would say Mulaney has more edge than Seinfeld does, but they have a lot in common. But Seinfeld just came on and seemed like an entitled old rich guy and was kind of rude.
Yeah.
Isn't that his whole shtick kind of now?
Yeah.
It does kind of seem a little bit like he was very successful as a result of Seinfeld and then just went to be a rich guy.
But it's okay to do that and
which-
dilly
that's
dally.
fine.
I don't. I always point this out, but I'm like, who you should try to be like? Fucking Paul Newman. You know what Paul Newman did? He got incredibly rich and successful in the 60s and the 70s, and then in the 80s he was like, I'm going to start a charity where we make organic food,
Yeah.
and I'm going to make cool movies that you wouldn't expect from me. So let's just try to aspire to that. You know what I mean? Let's
Are
not
you
just be a
putting
public
Seinfeld
asshole.
and Paul Newman?
Yeah, but
in the
maybe he's not a
same-
Paul Newman.
I'm just saying it's something to aspire to.
You know?
Is that
Well,
what
sure.
you're trying to aspire to?
I am so far from that you can't even believe it.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Sean,
I
Sean,
am.
Do
I
you
neither
like
got
salad
successful.
dressing?
Sure, yeah.
What kinds?
Top 3.
Well, I love a balsamic vinaigrette.
All
Sure,
right.
yeah.
You are a balsamic boy.
Yeah, you are.
I love any Caesar salad.
So
a
you will
Caesar's
do a Caesar dressing
absolutely.
even though it is a white condiment?
Yeah, I will. That is a rare
Okay.
exception.
Okay.
Oh, we're
After
on the
that-
same. You don't like white condiments. I'm on the same.
No white
Yeah.
drugs, no white condiments.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
life rule. You haven't heard that before? Take that to the grave with you. That's a
Yeah.
very important one. No white
I
drugs,
mean, on the
no white
last Midnight
condiments.
Boys, we were saying you and Chris, Clips boys. So
Oh, yeah,
you're not
yeah.
on the white drugs.
I don't think you need to use white drugs to appreciate what Clips were doing at that
Just
and
self-
are doing. Well, I think better understand the
Oh, I
cultural
forgot.
circumstances of the artists.
Your father was a detective, so
He was a
Yeah,
narc
he was-
detective. Yeah.
so he wasn't fucking with the clips.
No, but was my appreciation for the clips a reaction to that experience? Perhaps it was. Who
So
can
we
say?
got balsamic
Balsamic
Caesar,
and Caesar.
third.
I'll tell you what I like. I like Russian dressing, but I prefer it on a sandwich rather than a salad.
Yeah.
Russian dressing on a
Is-
sandwich is fire.
Is Russian dressing actually used on a salad ever?
I don't know if it is.
I don't think so. I think it is comparable to Thousand Island dressing, which is sometimes
which I don't love.
used on a salad,
A little
like
too
a
sweet.
shrimp Louis. But
Yeah.
I think Russian dressing is primarily a sandwich condiment, and it's heartening to hear you say that you will eat that because you don't like any other condiments on sandwiches.
I love ketchup.
But like do you put ketchup on a turkey
sandwich?
sandwich?
No.
Like, what's your ideal turkey sandwich?
Dry.
Right.
Dry?
Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
What?
No,
No nothing.
no.
it's-
Olive oil, some vinegar.
A tapenade would be nice. A little olive tapenade. I would
we
enjoy
don't
that.
do any, like we don't. We need some moisture.
Yeah,
no.
that's the thing. He does not want it. My in-laws
I-
are the same way, and it's like I'm surrounded
Turkey,
by psychosis.
a little bit of cheese, maybe some Munster. That would be nice.
How are
Obviously,
you, how
like-
you
tomato, onion. Those are all
Yeah,
great.
like how are you are you
Get,
just
how are
Tomato-
you
tomato?
swallowing?
Yeah, it doesn't
Just got that powerful throat. You
maybe
know?
maybe this is why you don't eat lunch because
Because I don't know how to eat lunch.
Yeah, exactly, because it just gets stuck in your throat and you're like
My final
No, I love
Seinfeld
sandwiches.
question, because I grew up reading Sean.
Oh wow.
Were you a
Sad.
mixtape about nothing fan? It has not aged well.
Yeah. I mean, I was really, really deep in covering rap when Wale and Cudi and Drake and all those guys were emerging. So I was listening to that stuff way too much. I loved anybody who's like, I have an idea for a concept album. You know, like if you just say that out loud, I want to try to, as Amanda has heard me like buy into movies that maybe don't work because I'm like, I like what they're going for here. I liked it. I definitely have not listened to it since 2010. And I probably would never put it. Is it even available on Spotify?
It is available.
This is the Seinfeld themed Wale mixtape that essentially preceded like his major label breakthrough.
yes,
Um,
where he's rapping he's sampling Seinfeld for the entire mixtape.
okay.
And that's, as a kid, I was just like, yo, Seinfeld's cool now. And then I went back to listen to it. I was like, oh no, Seinfeld and rap don't mix that.
you could make the case though that era is the beginning of the end for rap as the most exciting, creative art form that is also leading American culture.
I would agree.
You know what I mean? Like at the time, I was like, it's pretty cool that I get to write about this for a living and get to see these artists talk to them. I spent 4 hours with Wale once in an ESPN zone in New York when I was working at Vibe magazine.
That's cool.
Super nice guy. Really enjoyed my time with him. Didn't quite turn out to be the artist I hoped he would be. I think there's felt like something a little pandering about doing the Seinfeld tape at that time.
Yeah.
Where it was like, how many white boys can I get interested in this? That's honestly how it felt. And I was one of those white boys. So I feel comfortable saying that.
And before we leave, there is one important thing. The people have been asking for it, so I have to bring this.
Yeah.
You guys are our foremost thinkers on movies, correct?
It's not true, but okay.
May has not been great.
Yeah.
We've
Mhm.
gone through May Massacre. I think you guys have to talk to your people. All right. I no longer trust the critics. The critics are like, the movies are back. They're like the Fall Guy. Anyone but you. You have to go. And I'm like,
Take my hand. Take my hand. You can You cannot come on the big picture and hate on the Fall Guy. Everything else
I
is
haven't
fine.
seen it
Well,
yet.
okay, then what are we doing?
Because I
All
don't
right, give me the
trust.
hand
Because
back.
here's the thing.
Give me the thing. Give me the hand back. Okay. That's okay. Anyone But You is not a good movie, and you could hear that on the big picture. I agree with you that
I'm not saying this
The
is more so your
algorithms-
people, though.
Yeah.
well, you gotta adjust your algorithms like I did. And then
I'm the most controversial
you
cultural critic.
That's true.
I have to stay plugged in.
And then you got to come with me to see the Fall Guy. We saw it at Landmark
I
Pasadena.
refuse.
Why?
It's coming to VOD. Why would I? Why? would
It's a whole
Yeah,
other thing.
that's-
It's coming to
Yeah.
VOD.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
you guys,
that's not on us.
Can I just explain this very briefly? This is
Yeah.
a snake eating its tail thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of people were surprised to see that The Fall Guy, the Welcome to Summer blockbuster, came to VOD in 17 days. The reason it did that is because it didn't make $50 million in its opening
Right.
weekend. If it did, it could have been 30 days, maybe even more.
but people were coming out of the screenings for that being like, guys, Ryan Reynolds is our movie
Ryan
god.
Gosling.
Ryan Gosling, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
That was me coming out of If.
I mean-
Guys, Ryan Reynolds is me.
Sorry, Gosling is so much
They
better.
weren't, though. They weren't. I think that that's a movie that people like but don't love, that they want it to be better than it is. I liked it, didn't love it. I think Amanda liked it more than I did.
I had a great time.
I
mean,
think,
it's not.
Would you have told
not
me to
Citizen
go see it?
if it came out
Yeah.
if it came out on August 1st, you'd be like, that is a darn
Charles,
good movie.
you came to see If with me at 10:50 in the
Whoa,
morning.
whoa, whoa.
Like, listen,
I'm a card-carrying member of the Da Mob. I was just like, I need to.
I had fun.
I had fun too, but me going solo to Landmark Pasadena to see Fall Guy.
I think that sounds like a wonderful Saturday
have a-
afternoon.
I
We
have
were
a
just
busy-
talking about just the freedom in your schedule. You can, sleep when you want and eat when you want and see
Whoa,
movies
but
when
the
you
Midnight
want.
Boys are getting very, as Van quoted yesterday
Yeah.
in our group chat. He says, Charles, you need to stop whoring and gallivanting throughout LA
Yeah.
and come to these screenings. Because I couldn't see Furiosa with them.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I have things going on.
Right.
You know, the
Mhm.
shawties of Pasadena, they
Yeah.
want
I have
meet
to tell you, it took me an hour and a half to get home from the Furiosa screening, so you made a good decision.
But I'm just saying that
Um,
I don't trust the movie critics anymore. Because you're like, you guys gotta see these
No,
movies. in
you
theaters.
are
And I'm
onto
like,
something.
Yeah.
Which is I am guilty of this as much, if not more than anyone, which is that I need movies to not go away. I need them to stick around, and I need them to stick around in movie theaters. And I would say this year, even more so than the pandemic, people who work in Hollywood are like, this is not going well. Like, there's
It's really
real
not going
fear
well.
Yes.
that it's going to go away. Now, the survive till 25 is something that everybody is saying. It's going to be fine next year. Everything will be okay. The slates are going to be stronger, et cetera, et cetera. But there's real fear. There's
do
real
we
fear.
have another Dune part 2? Like, do we have something where it's like, I could go to my friends and be like, no, like, get your ass to like an IMAX.
No, I mean, Deadpool and Wolverine's going to be huge. It's going to be huge.
No, it's going to be huge, but I don't know if that's going to be like,
Can we all agree that it's great?
yeah,
Probably
where
not.
it's like
No.
Barbie, Oppenheimer. I think it also kind of
what?
redirected people to be like, I want that experience every single time I go to the movies.
Right.
And
it's
Dune
not.
helped. And everything else is, I'm like, If's not going to give you this.
I mean, we got Beetlejuice.
Yeah. Do you know about this?
What?
Sean's most anticipated movie of
That's-
2024.
No.
What is
Don't
Beetlejuice,
be rude.
Beetlejuice?
Don't be rude.
Wait,
He
really?
went to Las
No.
Vegas. He went to CinemaCon. He met with all of your people. And then he texted me and Chris, and he was just like, Beetlejuice, the movie of 2024. Are you guys hearing this? I'm hearing it.
That's the problem. See, Fantasy's too deep in the pocket of big movie theater.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I am.
And it's like,
I
Yeah.
am.
Dobbs, I have to be honest.
Mhm.
Keep him like contained. Like he's
So-
Do you
so
really
wish
think
that
this
you
is an
hadn't-
issue?
I
Like,
wish-
do you really think she's not keeping me
No,
contained?
because sometimes it's like when you and Chris get together, it's
I know
just
it is.
like
It is true. It's two bros just being like, and then we saw a weird horror movie, but that's nice too. That has its audience.
You're describing something everyone loves.
Yeah.
You know?
If you hadn't led with the Fall Guy, I would have been with you.
You know-
on this.
you know
so
what-
that's a note for you to take home,
All right,
just in
that's
your
fine, that's
framing.
fine.
I'll tell you.
Yeah, sure. It's been a tough year.
I think, okay, I want to say two things about this. One, it could be Gladiator 2.
Oh yeah.
I could see Gladiator 2 being a double whammy because Gladiator 2, Ridley Scott's back. It's been a complicated 10 years. I'm still riding with my guy.
Napoleon was funny.
Denzel Washington,
Paul
in-
Mescal's in that one.
and Paul Mescal.
Mescal's like he's the stock I have on him.
So if
not true.
Mescal can go up, plus we get Denzel in a Gladiator movie, that's the only thing I think I see on the schedule where I'm
Ridley's
like,
been
this could
really
bring us
shaky,
all
though.
together.
He's
Yeah.
been really shaky.
Yeah, I'm a big supporter, but I don't know
I
if
like
I
it.
can.
I think that you should get to
justify it.
have fun when you're 83 years old and you can't get to your house because of a raid next door.
I generally
you know?
agree. I generally agree.
Did
Yep.
you see those photos?
No.
That was tough. He lives next door to Diddy.
Oh,
So-
yes, I did see those.
Not ideal.
Yeah, it was
that
not
story
good.
keeps getting worse and worse. The other thing, and this is maybe a little bit outside of your interest set, but since 2018, there's at least one movie that has premiered at Cannes has been nominated for Best Picture, and often 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at Cannes this weekend, and I was like, I don't think any of these movies are Best Picture nominees.
Yeah. I mean, it is a shaky time. You're right. You're right that in general, it's like they're few and far between the actual hits, the fun stuff. We got to take the fun where we can see it. Challengers. Not everyone in the world has seen it.
That was great.
Great movie.
You didn't like
All right,
it?
that's fine. Did you see it in a theater or did you see it at
I
home?
saw it in a theater with my editor, Justin Sales,
Yeah.
and like friends. We all walked out of the movie being like, yo, what the fuck happened? And here's the thing. I liked it. I gave it a
Yeah.
3.5 on Letterboxd
Wow.
in the car with Justin. And he's like, change it now. That's not a 3.5. And I'm like, I had a good time.
Wow. Really?
And also, here's the thing with Challengers. It was kind of like there was enough people in there. There were like the meme cheers. There was like the, oh!
Yeah,
But there was not the rowdiness that I was just like, everybody's like, yo, people love this. And I was like, my theater was kind of like,
Right.
what the fuck is happening?
Yeah. That's an interesting thing for us to continue to explore because Luca
Right.
Guadagnino is an art house filmmaker and not a mainstream filmmaker,
Right.
but he made a mainstream movie. And so I think there's a set of expectations in that movie that people are not getting that seems to be flummoxing them. Nevertheless,
I was entertained, but it was,
Yeah.
as I called it, I was like, this is a
like,
Saturday
yeah.
afternoon TNT movie that people are acting like is a piece of high art.
Yeah,
yes. I
sure.
think that's right, actually. But
But
maybe
I love Saturday afternoon TNT.
Same.
Right.
That's why I
So-
liked it. But people are like, the movie critics like, yo, this is going to change how you think of cinema. I was like, no, it's just
yeah.
kind
it's
of
a goofy
entertaining.
sports
Yeah.
melodrama, but that's kind of the point. But like, but using actually, it's an interesting contrast to If, where it's like we have all of the tools. We have Trent Reznor, we have Luca Guadagnino, we have this playwright's screenplay, we have Zendaya, the biggest star in the world, and they made something that is like very goofy and high energy and unique that I thought worked really, really well. Then you have If, and that didn't.
Yeah.
But
But
we circle back. You know what all of these movies have in common? The power of storytelling and imagination. And I think that's a great place.
And that's what John Krasinski taught us.
the mind of John Krasinski.
so there's talk about a Home and Home with the Midnight Boys for Deadpool and Wolverine. It's been discussed. It's come up with Van. I think it would be fun. I'm a little nervous going into the Thunderdome with you guys. Amanda,
the
not
thing,
nervous.
big?
No, I think I will be informed, and I think your listeners will appreciate it.
We're throwing down here on the Midnight Boys. We're throwing down the gauntlet, okay? I'm really, really, really proud of my Ringerverse family. Van, Mal, Joanna came in here, wrecked y'all. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What you misunderstand is that the fans of our podcast hate us. So actually, I think maybe you could relate to that a little bit. You know?
Trust me. I have people in my normal life being like, hey, man, you got the people upset. And I'm just like, that's what it's about.
That's what it's about.
If you guys just want to admit the hierarchy of power at the Ringerverse is changing, the Midnight Boys are leading that charge.
Yes.
So you guys are welcomed into the Thunderdome at any time. Dobbs,
Mm-hmm.
I will never have anything to say about you negative. You are just like
I think that I will bring a unique viewpoint to Deadpool and Wolverine and the reappearance of Elektra.
Perhaps. We don't know. That's unconfirmed.
I want the best for Jennifer Garner.
Okay. Are you more of a Deadpool or more of a Wolverine, you think? Wolverine. It's Wolverine. No
It
times
is
a million.
Okay,
Yeah.
I saw Logan.
You're just like very grouchy. You have very sharp nails.
Yeah.
You know, good quips.
I think this is a Knox movie. I think if you
oh,
show Knox,
hell yeah.
Deadpool and Wolverine,
Hell
you are going to
yeah.
unlock something
No.
just very powerful in that child.
No.
Can I bring Knox as my +1 to Deadpool and Wolverine?
Sure.
That would be
That
incredible.
would be amazing childcare for me. So I will be at the beach while you do that, and I wish you the best.
Okay. I think we had talked about maybe doing Inside Out 2 with you as well. I don't know if you are
Inside
still
Out
interested in
2,
that.
I am very excited.
Okay, you're
because
locked in.
While I don't have children or emotions anymore,
Mhm.
I do love watching children's entertainment that are like, guys, anxiety. What's up with that?
It's true.
Okay, Charles, thank you very much for being here. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
shitting on these films with us. Thanks to Corey McConnell on the video tip. Thanks to Bobby Wagner, our producer, for this episode. Shout out, Bob. Later this week, another big movie. Will it live up to our expectations? Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. Amanda and I will discuss it. We'll see you then.